Hello, this is Paul here from the QE here in Darlington, and here's another English language A-level video. This one is about dialects. Okay, so this is an aspect of language diversity that's getting you ready for the AQA Paper 2, Language Change and Language Diversity. So today we're going to have a look at the different regional dialects and accents of the UK, and we're going to hone in on one particular example and do a particular case study of them. Okay, when we're talking about accents and dialects, remember to differentiate between those two things. Accents are phonological, whereas dialects, although they're linked into accents, dialects are to do with the words chosen and also to do with the grammatical forms as well. Okay, so don't confuse the two of them and make sure that you differentiate in your mind between the two of them. The thing to say about the UK is that we have lots of very distinctive regional accents and dialects. That we have a particular accent and dialect which seems to have prestige and status. So I'm talking here about received pronunciation, and I'm talking about standard English. And a linguist would say, well, received pronunciation and standard English aren't superior versions of language. They just happen to be the forms which have status and prestige socially. Okay, so let's have a think about some of these distinctive regional accents and dialects that we get across the UK. Scouse, Liverpool, for example. Now, lots of these are urban areas that during the Industrial Revolution, migrant workers moved towards, and the working classes working together in very close proximity forged their own very distinctive accent and dialect features. So in terms of Scouse, Liverpool, so obviously Liverpool is a port, and that's a key influential factor in the dialect's development. And it's one of those cities where the arrival of migrant workers from Ireland particularly have played such an important part. The thing about Scouse is, though, it's distinctive, but it's a real mix. So lots of mix of many different dialects, including sort of Northern Irish and a little bit of Welsh and Northern English. So, you know, when people are saying Aussie instead of hospital, or all right, lad, as in all right, kid, you know, they're drawing upon dialect features there, which have come from all sorts of different areas. Geordie is also another port. This dialect form can be traced way back to the Anglo-Saxons in the northeast, approximately 1,500 years ago. So the language they spoke has evolved into several dialects, including Geordie. So there's some sort of stereotypical characteristic Geordie speech there. Had a weir, I'm going to the town, I'm going to the town. In the centre of the UK, or the centre of England, you've got Brummie, so another dialect that can be traced back to the Anglo-Saxons with vocabulary like Boston Fittle, meaning great food. We have Yorkshire, and there are many words and expressions in Yorkshire that actually have their roots in the language of the Vikings. So it's the Vikings who start invading these islands from 793 AD, as I recall, and for 2 centuries or so, Viking settlers and Viking language has a really important influence on the country and the language. So it sums up, scram's ready. That word scram there, meaning food, is one of these all-purpose northern expressions that originates from the Vikings. You've got Mancunian, which is the dialect form of Manchester, which is similar to Scouse, but again, it's likely to have developed through an influx of migrant workers who moved to the city for work. And so this was really important, obviously, during the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution really begins in the middle of the 18th century. And Manchester, although it's hard to believe because it's kind of quite a long way from the sea, actually became a port during this time. Okay, so if you're in my group, then what I'll be getting you to do is on a map of the country, I'll be getting you to mark out these different areas, because I know from experience that not everybody's geographical understanding of the towns and cities of the UK is not necessarily brilliant. So I'll be wanting you to fill that in and just be marking out some of those key distinctive dialect forms. Let's focus in on a particular version. So we're going to look here at Northeast accent and dialect. So what I'd do is I would stop the video there and I would play the little excerpt, the 5-minute clip from the One show So if you put in there northeast accents, the one show, then you're going to see a famous impressionist who goes up to that area of the country and interviews some experts and local people about their language usage. And here are some of the questions that you need to be answering in watching that program. So, what reasons are suggested for the Geordie accent being voted the most attractive in the UK? Okay, so watch your video first and let's talk through some of the answers to those questions. So why has Geordie perceived as being so attractive? Well, one of the reasons put forward is that it has very strong representation in the media, that we frequently hear Geordie voices on the TV and on the radio, and therefore its familiarity gives us kind of positive associations. Okay, and this is backed up with research. If you go to your AQA textbook and you look on page 165, there's a page there which gives you lots and lots of research findings about people's perceptions of regional accents. And we have a paragraph here that says the Geordie accent has been described as being soothing, friendly, unchallenging, honest and relaxed. A study by the company Sitel, S-I-T-E-L, Sitel, surveyed more than 2,000 people across the UK and found, and this is the quotation, the Geordie accent is not only the friendliest in the UK, it's also most likely to put you in a good mood, according to respondents. Okay, so that's quite an interesting study that was conducted there about people's perceptions towards Geordie. The friendliest in the UK, note the superlative adjective there, and most likely to put you in a good mood. And also Geordie ranked amongst the top 5 accents in various categories of trustworthiness, helpfulness, efficiency, all of those sorts of things. Okay, so, and often people say, well, that's why you have quite a relatively high number of call centres situated up in the northeast, because companies are picking up on the popularity of the Geordie accent and dialect. Okay, right, so let's go on to the next one. Write the following phrases in I dialect to demonstrate features of the Geordie accent. Now remember, I dialect means spelling things in a non-standard way in order to get a flavour of the accent features. So we won't be able to write those down, but we can certainly hone in on these sorts of words. So we've got an anecdote spoken by a person from Newcastle who talks about a waitress confusing pina colada with 2 pints of lager, like that. So the key point here is at the ends of these words here, lager and river and area, like that. What you've got is a hard it's called an ash vowel at the end there. So in received pronunciation, you go lager, and that would be a kind of schwa sound, that sound at the end. Whereas in Geordie English, certainly, you've got that ash, that short vowel, lager, river, and area, with a ya sound on the end of that one. So that's a key kind of feature of Geordie accent according to this program. Then the attention moves on to the differences between some of these accents and dialects. If you're from not in this area, you might assume that everybody in the northeast is a Geordie, but of course people who live in different parts of the northeast would take great offence to that, because 10 miles from Newcastle you've got Sunderland, and Sunderland's call themselves Mackems, or rather Geordies call them Mackems, because what's interesting is that they interview somebody and he can very clearly show you the difference between a Sunderland pronunciation of the word and a Geordie pronunciation of the word. So a Sunderland person is more likely to say Mackem, and a Geordie is more likely to say Mackem, again with that short vowel sound, that sound. Okay, so what are the ingredients that have come together to make the Geordie accent? The key thing to say here is what we've had in the previous slide, that really you have to go back 1,500 years, back to the 4th and the 5th century, to see when the Anglo-Saxons were starting to settle great areas of the north. So that's had a big impact on the emergence of Northern English. And the other thing is about industrial expansion, that basically you get huge migration, principally from Scotland and Ireland and also parts of Wales. and that's had an impact on Geordie English. So the examples that are given in the programme are the word do, which is pronounced D in some parts of Newcastle. So that's the Scots influence. And also the word long, which is pronounced as lang in some parts of Newcastle as well. Okay, so a combination of Anglo-Saxons and industrial expansion, put those together and you get something that approximates to a Geordie accent. You then move a little bit south, sort of 50-mile drive down to the Tees, and there you've got the Teesside area with Middlesbrough. And it talks interestingly about the incredible emergence of Middlesbrough as the kind of Las Vegas of the north, because there it is in 1800, a single farm with merely 25 people, a total population of Middlesbrough 25, and 60 years later it has a population of 20,000. So it's the kind of Dubai of northern England. Okay, and that's obviously in contrast to Newcastle, which has a much bigger population in the 18th and early 19th century. Okay, so there's an interview with a worker who's working near the bridge there on Teesside, and again you could focus in on some particular sounds that he makes. And what's interesting is the way that he says the word worker in RP, worker. He goes worker like that. So it sounds more Liverpudlian. And again, this is to do with migration of workers. So the sorts of people who were travelling in the early 19th century across the country to live and work on Teesside. And there was a big influence there from Irish workers. So play would be another one. So whereas Geordie would go play like that, we have in Teesside play. So the key point is that within a relatively small geographical area, you do have some interesting, significant differences in accent and dialect features. Okay, so if you're in my class, I'd be getting you to be reading the article about the origins of Geordie on page 25 and 26. That's the first thing to do on there. And in terms of the answers to some of the questions, the first question says, how many years ago did the dialect emerge and from whose mouth did it descend? Well, we've already answered that because we're talking about 1,500 years ago, roughly, and we're talking about those Anglo-Saxon settlers. So it was principally the Angles who settled in the north, and they came across from modern-day kind of Germany and Denmark. And what happened is that that accent and dialect that they use has become this kind of generic Northumbrian dialect and accent. And so when we're talking about Northumbrian English, we're talking about English from north of the Humber. So picture the Humber, which is Hull kind of area in East Yorkshire, and go across the country to the River Ribble. And any language that's spoken above that area, pressing right up into Scotland, that is seen to be Northumbrian dialect. Okay, and then there's some attempt to show the kind of ancient dialect and accent boundaries of spoken English. So if I just find the paragraph here and read it out to you, that's probably the best way to do it. So intriguingly, we can still hear echoes of ancient dialect boundaries in contemporary spoken English. Speakers from the Midlands and the North, i.e. Northumbria and Mercia, pronounce words such as glass to rhyme with gas. So we're talking glass and gas, and stood to rhyme with stud, while speakers in the south use a different vowel sound in each case. So furthermore, north of the M62, speakers still pronounce words such as law and hall with a vowel sound that's used by speakers elsewhere in the words law and hall. So it's that kind of flat, distinctive vowel sound you get. While words such as fade and way are pronounced fade and way in a way that's quite different from southern speakers. Okay, so there's some attempt there to discuss the accent features of the north. It's never very easy to do. It's not easy for you to write about either. And this is where your knowledge of IPA is quite useful, because if you can memorize some certain IPA symbols, then you can show what an actual sound is. So, for example, if you're saying like river, it's that sound on the end. If you know in IPA that sound is an A and an E combined together, then that makes it easier for you to be writing about in an exam. Okay, one of the final questions is what's the impact of the subsequent invasions on the northeast? What's the, what influence has had that long term on the language? And really the answer to that is that parts of the northeast certainly have become linguistically isolated. If you go back to the Domesday Book, which was a big tax book written in the 11th century by the invading Normans, they did a complete inventory of all the towns and villages and properties across the country, but they didn't do Durham and Northumberland. So this area was very resistant to Norman conquerors. And also from the north, skirmishes with the Scots played such an important part over centuries and centuries. And so the River Tweed, which is that kind of border river that marks off England from Scotland, that was, the marking ground, like a dialectical accent marking ground between English, Northumbrian English forms and Scottish English forms. So the end result of all of this is a very strong sense of cultural identity, that people in the northeast invest quite a lot in the sound of their language, and they feel it's a really important part of their identity. And basically what they've tried to do through history is kind of resist centralizing tendencies. And you hear this in words like gan, for example, as an alternative to go, or the use of the word bairn instead of child. What you want to do now is to watch this fun little video called Let It Go. So there's a couple of Geordie lasses here who are singing a parody of Let It Go. And what they've done is they've transformed it into kind of Geordie accent and dialect. So if you were in my class, you'll see this in the booklet on page 29. Let's just deconstruct some of the language use here. The key point that we're making is that accent and dialect features here is not just to do with where you come from, but it's also signalling things about your identity. And it's often used in quite comical, ironic ways as well, particularly in the media. Okay, so it's quite a complicated relationship that people have with their regional accent and dialect. And it kind of depends on the context in which you find yourself, because in certain situations with certain other speakers, it may well be that you're drawing upon quite distinctive regional accent dialect features, whereas in other situations you're using much more kind of RP or standard English features. So don't think of these things as fixed. Think of these things as flexible and adaptable. And I suppose this is again where you can draw upon Howard Giles's accommodation theory, who's basically arguing that language is bound up with identity, and that people tend to either converge with people that they're speaking with, or they diverge their language away from the people that they're speaking with. So here's a comic example then. So this is a Geordie parody of Let It Go. The girls sing it, and they sing, "It's getting canny nitty, oot there the neat." Right, so canny is quite an interesting Geordie dialectical expression here. It's got two meanings. Canny can be a term of approval, canny meaning good, but here it's being used as an intensifying adverb. So it's it's emphasizing the adjective nippy. So canny is an interesting Geordie adverb or adjective that's used in various ways. Notice the use of the I dialect here to try and capture some of the vowel sounds of Geordie English. So out, that ow sound is actually a combination in an RP of two vowels. It's a diphthong, but in Geordie English it's a single long vowel. So out becomes oot, and night, which is again a diphthong sound in RP, becomes neat in Geordie. So you've got a kind of pattern that's happening there. So RP, diphthong sounds, tend to become kind of long vowels. Not a soul to be seen, Kingdom of the United. Here, obviously, you're going to need schematic knowledge in order to understand what she's going on about. So United being the football team, which obviously plays quite an important part in the social identity of the city. And our Lizzie is the Queen. Okay, and notice the use of the affectionate first person plural possessive pronoun our here, again spelt in a non-standard way. So this is distinctive across lots of parts of the north, and it shows kind of group membership and solidarity, doesn't it? And we've got this slang diminutive form of the name Elizabeth for the Queen, so Lizzie, like that. And I say diminutive. Diminutive means an E sound on the end of a word to make it sound more playful and affectionate. So we've got, and our Lizzie is the Queen, and it's blowing a hoolie, and the gales are strong outside. So we've got a very distinctive regional dialectical expression here, blowing a gale, so blowing a very strong wind, blowing a hoolie, okay? And again, you've got this distinctive long vowel sound instead of the RP diphthong sound. And then you've got Ganna steer the neat. So going to, Ganna steer the neat, scran on speed dale. So scran there. Again, it's one of these words which is linked in with Scots dialect, but it's very common across all sorts of northern dialects, meaning eating a lot. And the fact that you've got speed dial in there is part of the humour on this. So you've got some of these very old dialectical forms mixed in with some modern kind of current day language. Okay, so that's given you a bit of a flavour of one particular area of the country, and of course you could hone in on so many different areas of the country and get from it as much material, whether you're talking about Glaswegian English or Liverpudlian English or Cockney, etc. Okay, so thank you very much. I hope you found that useful.